Hi, in this quick guide I want to showcase you guys how you can set up localization with modern UIs. It's a relatively simple system, but there are still a few things you need to know here and there on how to correctly use it, and I just want to walk you guys through the entire setup process for like a menu. So you always start with a language selector. It is also just an element on one of your UI panels. So for example, we're going to go into this localization example, sections, and then I already have this language section in here, which has no options in it right now. We then go to our prefabs folder in Modern UIs, main UI, elements, and then language selector UIs. You can decide between the big and the small language selector. The only difference is how they're laid out. I can show both real quick. This is the normal one, and this is the big one. The big one just has more space for more languages to put. So if you have like 2 or 3 languages, the normal one should be fine. But for anything beyond that, you might want to look into using the big one, just so that you get extra space. In my example right now, I just want to do 2 languages, so we're just going to stick to the default one. So I'm just going to delete the big one. If you now go to the language selector, open it up, go to the selector UI. We see the language selector UI script. And if we open this up again, we see the buttons for the languages. This already has persistence enabled with UI language as a data key, which means when someone changes the language, it will be saved. This can also automatically be linked to the VRChat main menu language. So if a user has your language that you're now adding set as their language in the VRChat menu, it will automatically use that by default. They can always obviously change it manually, and then it will use what they've set it to manually. But if they haven't changed it manually, it will always use the menu one. So in my case, I want to do English, as this is already starting with English, and then the second language will be German. So I would start with going to my button. In this case, second language, I would just call this one German. And then I'm going to into that button text. And then we're going to rename this to German. Another text over here is also German. And then on the selector UI itself, you see we have EN and then second language code changed this. This is the VRChat language codes based off the RFC 5646 syntax. You can look up the syntax for these codes. So if you want to add a language that you don't know the code of, you can just Google that. This will use the same order as what we have on the buttons here. So we have English first and then German. So English and then this case would be DE, because DE stands for German. We're already mostly set up on this. Like that's all we need to do on the language selector itself. And now we have to start actually translating things. The way this works with modern UIs right now is that each thing, like component that you want to translate on, has a localized component added to it. So for example, on the translator itself, if you go to the title, you see that it has a localized component on it. It allows swapping out text, sprites, materials, and audio clips depending on what language someone has selected. Should be used in combination with a selector UI, same order will be used. So for example, right now, this has our text up here in, and the element 0 is language, because as I said, same order as the buttons again. The first one is English, so this one would be English. We're now going to add another one, and this one would be our German version, so Sprache. We're going to continue doing this with all of the text that we have. So for example, even on the buttons, we can go to English, button, text, or we set up with English and then add, and this one would be English, just spelled slightly different. And same thing goes with the German button. First of all, we need to change element 0 from second language to German, because it had like the text in here that it was previously. And then we're going to add another one that will be the German equivalent. The language selector already has these localized components added to it, but everything else in the menu doesn't. So if you want to add that, we have to go through all of the different categories and sections that we have. So for example, we have our language section, which has a header with a title. We can go here, you see language section, and does not have a localized component on it. We can just open this, search for localized component, poof, and now we have a localized component. And it automatically grabbed the text mesh pro that we had on here and grabbed the text that was in here as the first option. Since usually that will be English and the default is English in all of my menus. So we will just keep this as is and then add our German translation. And then we can continue doing so with all of the other sections. So for example, we can go to the example section that we have done here, go to the header, title, add a localized component, add the German version, there we go, and so on. Now we go to options, we have our example slider, for example, we can change the title of this, localized component, slider, and then, I don't know, Schieber, I guess. I don't really know the perfect German translation for slider, to be honest. But we can just continue to do so with all of our options. So for example, the example toggle has the title, which is localized component, toggle. I'm just going to call the Schalter in English, in German, I'm sorry. And then for this, for example, we have these on and off buttons. For those, we can just go deeper into the UI. So select a UI, off, button, text. We can add a component, which would be our localized component. And this one would be aus. Same thing goes for the on button, text, add component, localized component, add the German translation, an. Then we can go into the example three-way toggle and do the same thing here. So title again, localized component, three-way toggle, 3-Wege Schalter. And also close the ones that we are done with so that they don't clutter up our hierarchy. And then again, we go into the selector view itself, off, button, text, add component, localized component, aus. Obviously, if you have, like, for example, a toggle that you always localize the same way, you can just make a prefab variant of that and then just use that throughout all of your menus. Also, I just realized I completely unpacked everything in here. You normally shouldn't do this, but in this case, everything is unpacked. So just ignore that. But same thing here, auto, localized component, auto, and I think in German will also just be auto, so I will just leave it like this. And then on, button, text, add component, localized component, an. And also you can do this for other things. So you have text components, UI images, you can swap materials on a mesh, you can change clips in an audio source, and a lot of other things. Now we're done with this section. We can close this and go to the teleport section. Same story as the other one. We go to the header, title, add component, localized component, and then this will be teleport Bereich. And then same thing here, we go to the options, example teleport, title, localized component, add another option, and then odd, and then button, we also have a text on here, localized component, and then teleport, teleportieren. This is said earlier, you can do this with images. So you can, for example, have this lovely image here. We can just open this up, go to our mask, and then the image, add a localized component. It automatically grabs the sprite we have and the first images that it's already in. We're going to add another one, and then we can just use this one, for example, as our option for German. And now once this is done, we can just go into play mode and test this out. You can do this with all of the menus, but you should always only have one language selector, You will get an error message if you have more than one. The system isn't really designed to have more than one currently. So you should just have one for your world. Close menu, we can go over here, see that this one's always set to German, because I apparently had that in my persistent storage. But we can just switch languages now, and it works perfectly fine without any problem. Yeah, it's as easy as that. You can do this with all of the menus. So even just like, I don't know, a changelog, for example, could have a German and an English version. And also stuff like these menus, like the text, the buttons could be translated, everything. It's still relatively simple with what you can do, but it works pretty well. And if, for example, we would now go into the Archer itself and I would have had my menu set to English or German, it would choose the corresponding language in the menu. Yeah, I hope this was helpful, and yeah, goodbye.